Hello and welcome to the MS for Mama podcast. I'm your host, Abby Halberstadt, happy wife, mama to 10, Bible-believing Christian. And today's episode is going to be a little bit of a mixed bag simply because I do not have the brain bandwidth for anything else. Plus, there's a lot going on over here in the Halberstadt household that I thought I would update you guys on. So we're just going to chat like we would over coffee, except if you know me really well, you know I wouldn't be drinking coffee. I would be drinking chai tea or hot chocolate if it were warm, or maybe lemonade or something like that, because I am so not a coffee girl. Before we dive into that, I want to highlight for you our podcast sponsor, Voetberg Music Academy. If you want to learn music together as a family and pay one price for all of you to learn together, Voetberg Music Academy has a wonderful way for you to learn guitar, fiddle, mandolin, ukulele, or piano. And they have something really fun in the month of May where if you sign up, you can use my code MS4Mama20 for 20% off each month that you're enrolled. And you can join their 6 Songs of Summer challenge, which is so much fun to do together as a family and then participate with thousands of other Christian families who also do Voetberg Music Academy. VoetbergMusicAcademy.com is where you want to go to sign up. And the code is MS4Mama20. Okay, so I wrote just a very brief little note in my phone about today's episode just to remind me about the topics that I wanted to cover. But like I said, I just want to chat with you guys today. It feels like life in our household tends to ebb and flow in seasons, and I'm guessing most of you can relate. Some seasons are busier than others. Some feel more stressful than others. And for us, it has a pretty typical pattern, at least in the last 4 or 5 years since I started publishing books and started doing some speaking engagements. And then we started adding some more sports with our older kids who are able to drive, but still, it just makes a lot more moving parts. It makes things busier, but good. It's not the kind of busy that always drains you. Notice I just said always. Sometimes it does feel kind of draining. And our whole family, I was going to say, is about to enter, but really has already entered and is continuing to roll through one of those high demand busy seasons with lots of exciting things going on, but sometimes just lots of things. So the first thing that I want to talk about is that our family just got back from Hawaii. Sean and I have actually gone several times, mostly in conjunction with work trips for him. If you don't know, my husband is a software developer who specializes in creating software for 911 dispatch centers. So when a 911 dispatch emergency operator pushes a button, his software sends that call to fire or to police or to EMS. And so it's a really cool job. I understand basically nothing more than what I just told you because I am so not a computer programmer. But he's been doing it for about 20 years. And he installs his systems to some extent all over the world. Most of them are concentrated in North America. So he has installed in Canada for the Royal Mounted Police. He has installed in Hawaii multiple times, so off the mainland. And then he does both coasts regularly, Boston, San Francisco, Miami, LA, that kind of thing. And so we have gone to Honolulu a couple of times where I got to fly with him for a work trip. One of the times was for my 35th birthday. We had Honor, who is our number 7, and he was probably about 8 or 9 months at the time. But we had also been once just of our own volition many moons ago, about 14 years ago, when we had Della, who is our 3rd, and she was 2 months old. And we went on a trip with another couple to Kauai. And we loved it. It was a really fun experience. And the island is beautiful. So as we were planning a family trip over the last year, we really kept coming back to the fact that we had gotten to experience the gorgeous views and sea breezes and ocean and all the beautiful things in Hawaii, but our kids had not. So we started planning for all 12 of us to go this spring. Thankfully, because Sean travels a lot and I have traveled more due to speaking engagements, we were able to get almost all of our tickets with points through American Airlines. So that's always nice to get those taken care of. And then typically what we do, because people ask questions about how you travel together as a big family, we rent 2 vehicles instead of one large one. So usually we drive a 15-passenger transit. I'll talk about that more in just a second. So just going about our daily lives when we're all together, going to church, anytime where all 12 of us are needing to be in one vehicle, we have a 15-passenger Ford Transit. And then when we travel, it's either impossible to find a really big vehicle a lot of times For example, in Europe, I think 9 was the largest passenger van that we could find that we could rent as a personal vehicle. Or they're so expensive that it makes more sense to rent 2 SUVs, which is what we did in Europe, or 2 Suburbans, which was what we did 3 years ago in Alaska, or in this case, 2 minivans, which is what we did in Hawaii. And so it honestly works out great because we typically have things that we do all together, in which case we will all hop in the cars and drive, just follow each other, to wherever we're going. Or pretty often different combinations of kids, because we have, an age range of almost 19 down to 4, will want to do different things, which was definitely true in Hawaii. So sometimes people wanted to get up really early in the morning and go surfing, and other people wanted to stay home. So we would just work it out to where different combinations of kids would ride in one car. And of course, you had to make sure that, it wasn't more than the number of kids that could fit in a van. But it always worked out. So that's typically what we do. And it's functioned beautifully for our family. I actually just had this question on my What Do You Want to Know Wednesday, so I thought I would answer that here for those of you wondering. So we went to the island of Kauai, all 12 of us, and we thought about island hopping. We thought about going to Maui or going to Oahu, but really the biggest stress when traveling with a big family is the actual getting through the airport and the plane rides. Car rides are no big deal. And honestly, our kids did phenomenally well on these plane rides. The 4-year-old twins did great. They slept, they played with activities. They just really, it couldn't have gone any better than it did. So I'm so grateful. Praise the Lord for that. Because there's always this trepidation traveling with small children. Now, this is the first time that we've ever done a big trip where our youngest were 4 plus. And that definitely makes a difference. The trip to Europe was almost 30 hours from start to finish, getting ourselves from Texas to Paris. And we were definitely unraveling by the end. We being the parents, mentally unraveling, but keeping it together, but the toddlers openly unraveling, but they were less than 3 years old. So, it makes a difference to have that extra 1.5 years, 2 years of development under the belts. Helps so much. So we decided to stay in Kauai to not have to deal with more plane flights and just to conserve our time there and have it be more relaxing. And we split our time between 2 Airbnbs, which is what we always do, because renting hotels, Airbnbs for a large family get expensive quickly, but hotels add up even more quickly because each room in a place like Kauai is, $200 plus, and we have to have like 5 rooms to get all of us in there, potentially. We could cram more in, but 4 or 5 rooms. So we always opt for an Airbnb because we can all be in one house together and we can get more bang for our buck, because even if we pay as much as we would for hotel rooms, we get more amenities, which was true of our house on the North Shore, which is where we stayed first, because we found a rental that had a pickleball court and it had basketball on it. So there was a basketball goal. Plus this property backed up to a trail that you could hike. Hike is a very relative term here because it was it wasn't uphill. It wasn't, through anything terribly hard to get through, but it was beautiful. And we did that hike one day together as a family. And I will say, I think that was probably my favorite full day there. So Kauai is 5 hours different from Central Time, where we are here in Texas. And it was so interesting being up at 5 a.m. with the sun fully shining, because it is bright very early in the morning there, and feeling like you just had your whole life before you. And of course, we didn't have all of the normal work obligations and deadlines and schooling to do because our homeschool year is done. We left right after our homeschool co-op finished, literally the day after our last day of homeschool co-op. And the days just seemed to stretch on forever. So I remember my favorite day of the whole trip was probably like the 3rd or 4th day. And we had lots of good days, but this one was it just stood out in my mind as one of those ideal days where everybody's getting along, the food is good, you always feel like you have more time than you need, which is a very rare feeling for me. And especially when you have lots of people in the mix. So I would say it's a very rare feeling for our family. And so we went on a hike, we had breakfast early and we played pickleball before it got hot, and we took a dip in the pool, which this property had a pool. And then we went on this hike and you went to this stone dam with a waterfall near it. And we swung into the river that surrounded it with a rope swing. And then we came back and we had lunch and we took naps and relaxed and made dinner at home and watched a movie and hung out outside on the beautiful property. So that wasn't, necessarily typical of every single day. I don't even remember if we went to the ocean that day because normally we were going to the beach in some way, shape, or form, either to look at tide pools or to attempt to surf, which some people did get up on their boards several times. I was not one of them. I was not committed to that. Or boogie board or, play in the sand. One of our twin boys, Toby, just ran into the surf with arms wide open. And our other twin boy, Titus, stayed as far away from the waves as possible. It was kind of hilarious how sharp the dichotomy was between their two responses to the ocean. And so we stayed there for 2 weeks. It was 16 days total, including travel days. And we spent about 8 days in that first rental and then traveled south to a rental near Poipu Beach, which if you've ever been to Kauai, Poipu is kind of the most touristy beach there. It's the most populated one. But we drove all around the island and found gems like Secret Beach, which had this wonderful tide pool surrounded by high rocks, and we could jump into the tide pool. We were the only ones there. And that was the theme for a lot of our outings, because since we went at the very end of April, beginning of May, their school wasn't out. There weren't very many tourists there. And the weather was phenomenal. I mean, it's Hawaii. The weather is beautiful, but each time it was forecasting rain. It would only rain for a little bit, which again, I am aware that Hawaii tends to be rain for a little bit and then sun for a little bit, but there were quite a few days where it was supposed to be raining all day and it turned out to be sunny. And we were able to do all kinds of outings. Sean and the older boys went fishing. Theo got to go along. Older boys always love going deep sea fishing. That's kind of my husband's thing with his dad from of old, and he's passed that down to our boys. And I have no doubt that they will all continue to participate in that tradition as they get old enough. And Theo was old enough to go deep sea fishing for the first time this time. So they went out deep sea fishing a couple of times. We did all kinds of beach excursions. If Sean was out doing something with a group of kids, another group of kids and I would go get shave ice or go on a train ride at this place called the Kilohana Plantation. It was just such a good experience, and we had such a blast as a family and came back refreshed and ready to dive in to all the things that we have going on going forward. Although I will say, backing up, that I had been invited to go on Kirk Cameron's show Takeaways for a Mother's Day special. And the only dates that they had available for me to come were the day before we flew out for Kauai. So I actually flew to Nashville on a Monday, did the show taping on a Tuesday, flew back on a Tuesday, and then got up at 2 a.m. to fly to Kauai on a Wednesday. So that kind of kicked everything off as far as the busy season. And then we've been back since, this is a Wednesday. We've been back since Friday. And another fun development in our house is that my girls, Evie and Nola, are creating a baking book, a cookbook that primarily focuses on baking because that's their true love. They have been baking treats and savory things for the last 4.5 years, basically since right after the Twinbies were born. And my publisher offered them a book deal because she had seen all of their hard work and all the things that they created. And she said there was a hole in the market and she wanted a tween baking book for her daughter who's coming up on tween years. And she asked if Evie and Nola would want to do it. And so we are in full baking book prep mode. It won't be available until fall of 2026 because the traditional publishing process is a slow one. But that's coming, so get excited about that. If you follow me on social media, some of these things you'll know that I've referenced, but I know not everybody here that listens on the podcast does. So if this is news to you and you have a budding baker or even a 5-year-old that just wants to learn some basic skills, this is going to be such a fun book for anybody that wants to get in the kitchen more with their kids. So we are actually working on that today. I can hear them clinking away downstairs, stirring and mixing because we have a whole photography session for that coming tomorrow. And I knew that was happening as soon as we got home from Hawaii. I also have a speaking event in Pennsylvania that my girls get to come with me to this weekend coming up. And then as soon as we get back from that, I am flying again to another TV interview next week, which again, this is not normal for us to bookend this much with this many flights and this much activity. But I feel like it comes like compressed in like 5 weeks or 4 weeks or even 3-week little chunks. That's the schedule that they have. So I always go to Sean and say, is this worth doing? And he'll say no or yes. And to these two things, he was like, yep, go for it. We'll figure it out. So that's coming up. So this is going to be an extra busy week as we pack up things to go to this event. We'll be taking merch from our shop, Paint and Pros. And I can't wait to meet ladies and hug their necks and get to encourage them in the Lord. This is a motherhood event. In Lancaster County, which is one of my favorite places to go and meet people because they're just such a warm-hearted, sweet group of people. And I know this because I've gotten to do an event called the Wellness Collective for 3 years, which is put on by some friends of mine who live in Lancaster County. I think the tickets for that are sold out probably because it sells out so quickly, but I'll put that bug in your ear if you've never heard of the Wellness Collective and you live in that area and want to check it out for next year, or if things happen to not be sold out somehow. By some miracle, you can check that out now. One very fun development in our house has been that, so I've driven, I mentioned that 15-passenger van that we've been driving. Before that, we had a 12-passenger Nissan NV 3500, and both of them have served us so well in being able to put everybody in the family in one vehicle and go somewhere together and even bring some friends along. But lately, because I have two drivers, Ezra, who is almost 19, and Simon, who's 17 and a half, both drive, and then Della will be getting her permit this year. Because I have some drivers already and more coming up, I fairly regularly find myself driving around in a 15-passenger van, either by myself sometimes or with 2 to 5 children in the back, which 5 children, there's not a lot of vehicles that can fit that. There are some, but not a ton. So it's great to have the transit, especially if we're picking up some friends to take with us somewhere. But when it's like 1 to 2 or by myself, it feels kind of strange to be driving this giant vehicle when you don't necessarily need it. It had never even really occurred to me to do anything about that until someone mentioned something. I can't even remember who it was. And they were like, will y'all ever get another car? And I'm like, yeah, someday when it makes sense. And then it just kind of planted this idea in my head that the someday might be now. And I didn't say anything about it for months, but the thought kept occurring to me and it kept coming up in my brain at odd moments. And so I was like, well, I'll just talk to Sean. So I said, I keep having this recurring thought. I don't know if it's worth it because, the 15-passenger van is fine with me. But it feels a little silly to be driving such a giant vehicle when we don't need it for everybody to be in at all times anymore. And we're in a little bit of a different season of life. And he said, okay, I'm listening. And I said, what do you think about getting a smaller vehicle that we can put smaller amounts of kids in, or I can drive around by myself? And he has a vehicle that he uses that we can fit some of the kids, but not all of the kids in when he has to go to work things or we're just driving separate places. So he was like, yeah, let's talk about it. Well, he said, what do you have in mind? And normally the answer would be, I don't know, let's research, because I'm not a car person. I'm not someone that dreams of driving a particular car. But as that thought had been occurring to me, the only car that kept coming into my brain was not the most practical car, but it was the one that I was drawn to. And it was a Ford Bronco, which my husband drives a Ford Expedition and I drive a Ford Transit. And then I was drawn to the Ford Bronco. So you would think that we are like dedicated Ford people, but really it's more convenience because the other two vehicles have made the most sense. But this wasn't convenience. This was preference. And so I said, you're going to laugh at me. You're going to think I'm silly, but like, this is the vehicle that I'm interested in. There is a version of it where I could take 4 kids with me, but that's obviously not a ton of kids and it's not the most practical. And he said, well, okay, do some research. I'm not opposed to it. See what you can find. So I had a particular color in mind. It's called Cactus Gray. It's this really pretty, soft, grayish seafoam green. And as I looked for a particular trim model that I was interested in, which is called the Heritage trim model, because it kind of has a retro throwback flair. Intentionally, they wanted it to look like a retro Bronco. I found that those things held their value. And by held their value, I mean were way overpriced for a used vehicle, especially in the cactus gray color, which I had no idea any of this because I had never done any of this research leading up to this. And so I had the hardest time finding what I was looking for a good deal with not a lot of miles on it and in the color that I wanted. And then I found out that they had discontinued this color. And so Sean said, well, if you found a good deal, we could potentially paint it that color. So I started going down that road and found out that cactus gray paint with the Bronco code or the Ford code for that color is incredibly expensive. It's like $500 a quart, a pint. I don't remember what the value on it was, but it was really, really pricey. So I was like, okay, well, I'm probably gonna have to give up that dream. And then I started narrowing down my search more and more because what I really wanted was a stick shift. My first car to me, I just drove family cars when I was a teenager, but my first car that I owned was a 2002 Volkswagen Jetta TDI 5-speed. So TDI is a diesel. I got 40 miles to the gallon on that car. And believe it or not, as a 20-year-old, it was my dream car. And I loved driving it. And then we quickly outgrew it because of having a lot of kids close together. And so we sold it and got a minivan, and I was fine with that. I wasn't mourning it or anything. And the minivan was so practical and it had sliding doors and I was fine. But my favorite thing in terms of driving is definitely driving a stick shift. It's what I learned to drive on. All of our family's cars, all two of them, were stick shifts, and it just has a special place in my heart. So I started looking for a Bronco with a stick shift, and I found that I had really just absolutely researched myself out of anything that I could possibly find for a decent amount of money in the color that I wanted, because stick shifts for Broncos are really rare. And so I started thinking outside the box. And I ended up finding a smoking deal on a black Heritage 2024 5-speed. It's actually technically a 7-speed because they include this low speed that's like off-roading, grinding speed. I can't remember what that growling. There's a word. I can't remember what they call it. And then reverse is considered a speed because it's a particular gear that it's in. So it's a quote unquote 7-speed Bronco. It's a black one. And, like I said, it's the Heritage trim. It was all the things I was looking for except for the color. And I found it in Michigan for an incredible deal. So it's in a place called Zeeland, Michigan. And that meant nothing to me and was not special or important to me until I mentioned it on social media. And I was flooded. I mean, 100 messages about one particular place where people were telling me I used to live there. My parents live there. I have friends who live there. I live right beside it. And they're like, you picked the best possible place, like the most honest place, the place where you're going to find a car dealership with people with the most integrity to buy a car from. And I was like, I didn't pick anything. That's just where it just so happened to be that there was a stick shift majorly in my price range because it was such a good deal in the trim model that I wanted. It only had 8,000 miles. Like there were so many things that lined up. And then it turned out I was getting a car from a place that is like the Bible Belt of the North and full of godly people who are honest. This guy gave me an even better deal. And even when someone else wanted the car, he honored that deal, the discount that he had given me. I was just blown away. So in case you're wondering, his name is Josh, and I bought it from a place called Ageless Auto in Zeeland, Michigan. And I assumed, because I got so many messages, I knew it wasn't a big place, but I assumed it had, a decent population. There are 5,000 whole people in this tiny town that so many people messaged me about on the internet. I was just blown away by the Lord's provision in being able to find just what I'd been looking for in our price range from a godly guy who was honest. He went and picked my boys. When I say my boys, I mean Sean and Ezra, who went to Michigan to get it and drive it back because I could not find any trustworthy options for shipping the car. It seemed like every review I read ended with, and then they charged me twice what they said they were going to charge me, and the car was all dented up. So that didn't sound great. He picked up Sean and Ezra from the airport, offered, they didn't even ask, did it for free, just stellar situation. And then because I got such a good deal on the car, Sean said, well, do you want to paint it that cactus gray color? And I said, nah, that's too expensive with the paint. And I found another color that I loved. And Sean called around and did a bunch of research. I did some research, and we found a place in Dallas that they literally drove this Bronco back to from Michigan, dropped it off. I picked them up in Dallas and brought them home. And it turns out that we went with this place because it had great reviews, and it gave us, and they gave us a really good quote. And this is in Dallas. It's called McGee's Custom Auto. And then it turns out they are strong Christians. Every time we went there to either drop the car off or pick it up, or I guess those are the two times that we were there, they're playing sermons in the background or Christian music. And they were honest and told us what to expect, gave us a quote, stuck to their quote, did what they said they were going to do. So all around, the situation ended up being just a really cool example of the Lord caring about the details, very similar to where it talks about in Matthew 6, like, if I clothe the flowers of the field this way, how much more so do I provide for you and lavish good things upon you? I certainly don't, quote unquote, deserve this car, and it's not a necessary thing, but it was very humbling and exciting to see the way the Lord worked out the details for good. So I have gotten to drive that since we picked it up on the way home from Hawaii on Friday. And that has been so fun. And my kids are loving riding around with me in my zippy little 7-speed Bronco. So that's a fun new thing around our house. And then the other thing that I wanted to chat with you about briefly before I have to sign off and take my girls to VBS drama practice. They have parts in this little skit they're going to do each day for VBS at our church in July, I believe, is Mother's Day. So we have some really fun Mother's Day traditions at our house. I've talked to you guys about Christmas traditions and birthday traditions. So Mother's Day at our house is fun for a multitude of reasons. For me particularly, obviously, because I get to be the recipient of these fun ideas. But one of them is that about 10 years ago, when Sean asked what I wanted for Mother's Day, I said, can I have the night off before Mother's Day? Like just that evening to go. And at that point I had only small children and a lot of them, and everybody needed me all the time. I said, I just want to eat in peace and quiet and go do returns at Walmart of stuff that I need to do, or go to Lowe's and plant shop, or just watch a movie just by myself or whatever, just 3 hours where no one needs me for that amount of time. And he was like, yeah, we can do that. And it became this tradition where I would literally save things that I needed to do, like errands that I needed to do that were hard to do with a bunch of little kids, and go finish those things and get some food and then come back home. And somewhere along the way, he started making these eclairs. I'll put the recipe in the show notes, that have become a tradition in our house for Mother's Day. And the cool thing is, as we see our kids grow and develop like skills and desires to serve and to be helpful and to learn new things, we see that things that we did ourselves, whether it's the mom or the dad or together, become things that they can do for you or for each other. And on the one hand, you kind of start to feel like, oh, am I slacking by not doing these things anymore? And then you realize, no, I've equipped them. They've learned. They are wanting to step into this role of being capable and responsible. So these eclairs that Sean made for years by himself, or with quote unquote help from little hands that probably, they were sweet and they were helpful, but probably practically might have hindered a little more than helped during certain years. Our older kids have actually now taken over making these eclairs for this Mother's Day tradition. So they'll make those while I'm out. Well, I have more freedom to do errands without everybody with me, to get things done that I need to. So this tradition, like this year, for example, I didn't even start until like 8 p.m. because we were doing things around the house. We'd only been home for one whole day from Hawaii. We were catching up on things. And I went to get some dinner, and I went to one shop that was open for like 10 more minutes when I got done with dinner. And I even went and got an ear piercing. I got a third hole in each of my ears, just almost on a whim, at a place that was open late. So it just looks different than it used to. And my older kids were home making eclairs, and then we do breakfast on Mother's Day morning. And then we go to church. But I just love that glimpse into what used to feel like kind of a lifeline. Yes, it only happened. I'm sure I went places by myself other than once a year, but like to have that thing to look forward to of like, I will have 3 hours to myself. I don't have to have it, but my family is fine with my having it. And I'm so excited about that, to now being in a place where it's not as needed, but it's still a fun tradition to carry on. And my family still is happy for me to do it. And then my kids are taking over and kind of carrying on the banner. I was texting with a friend who was talking about how her kids, she dropped them off. None of them drive yet, but she dropped them off at Hobby Lobby and they gathered supplies. And then they made her a Mother's Day banner from scratch, cut out all of the letters and just made this gorgeous banner. She sent me a picture of it. And she was like, I'm just flabbergasted that they came up with this themselves. So maybe more than anything, I know that if these are not traditions that you have, that it could be easy to hear me talk about these things and say, well, why don't I get a Claire's? Why don't I get a night off? And for one, I would say that I think it's reasonable to at least request something. The answer may be no, but this was some of these things, or at least the asking for the night off before Mother's Day, was something that I requested when Sean asked me if I had any requests. So, being willing to not say they should just know what I want, but being willing to articulate a desire of your heart if it can work out. That's one thing. And then two, just know that this is a process and that your kids will mature and grow and that they will develop skills and that your life will look different in 10 years than it looks now. And that's going to be true for me in 10 years. So I'm not just talking to young moms, but I know it's a huge lifeline to young moms to hear, like, things will not always stay where you are as needed as you are right now. And that's both something to hang on to for hope, but it's also something to sober you up, to realize like what you have now and the sweet season that you're in, even if there are parts of it that are really hard, won't last forever. So I know none of the young moms like to hear cherish it, but recognize it for what it is. Honor that season that you're in would be my recommendation, be my encouragement to you. So I have to run out the door to take my girls to their drama practice, but I just wanted to chat with you guys today, give you an update on some things that are going on in our lives as we are in an unusually busy season. Thankfully, most of January through the beginning of April was pretty chill. Like I said, it kind of ebbs and flows, and I love that we can work together as a family and as a mom and dad unit, as a husband and wife, to make all of this work together. Sean's had work trips in the midst of this, and I just am grateful for the place that we've come to where we can truly work together as a team to accomplish the things that the Lord has placed in our lives to do, whether it's something fun like a trip or something sometimes not as fun like a work trip requirement or finishing up school together. But I encourage you in that as well to look for opportunities that whatever the Lord has called you to, one, do it all to the glory of God. Two, look for ways to work together as a team rather than resent each other for the demands on your time, because it really does change your outlook on the results of those demands and on how you view each other as partners rather than, someone that's in competition with you. So I'm leaving you with that today, and I hope you have a great rest of your week. If you enjoy the M's for Mama podcast, I would be so honored if you would subscribe and follow along, maybe share with friends, or even leave a review. And if you want more content on motherhood and biblical responses to cultural issues, be sure to follow along on Instagram at m.is.for.mama.